I spent 31 years working in insurance, not selling it, investigating it. Claims adjuster, then senior investigator, then regional director for the Mid-Atlantic division of one of the largest carriers in the country. My whole career was built on one skill, knowing when something doesn't add up. You learn to read people differently when your job is figuring out who's lying. You notice the pause before the answer, the detail that's almost right but not quite, the story that's smooth in the middle but frays at the edges. After 3 decades of that, it becomes as natural as breathing. You don't turn it off when you go home. I should have paid more attention to what I was seeing at home. My name is not important. What happened to me is, I'm 64 years old. I live in a suburb of Richmond, Virginia, and for most of my adult life, I thought I had done everything right. Worked hard, provided, stayed. My wife. I'll call her my wife because that's what she was for 37 years. And I raised 2 children in a house I bought with my own hands and my own credit. Our daughter is 40 now. She married a man named Kevin 8 years ago, and from the first weekend he showed up at our Thanksgiving table, I felt something I couldn't name. Not dislike exactly. More like the particular stillness you feel when you're reading a policy and the dates don't quite match. Kevin is the kind of man who fills the room with his confidence before he's earned the right to it. He laughed too loud. He had opinions about my retirement accounts before I'd known him 6 months. He called me Pop before I ever said he could. My wife thought he was wonderful. Our daughter thought he was wonderful. I kept my mouth shut, the way you do when you love your child more than you trust your instincts. That was my first mistake. The second mistake was letting it become normal. Kevin and my daughter moved into a condo 20 minutes from us, and over the years the distance collapsed. They were at our house most weekends. Kevin lost his job at a logistics company. Laid off, he said, though I noticed the timeline didn't line up with any of the restructuring news I'd read about that company. My wife and I started covering their portion of dinners out, then their car insurance when his lapsed. Then the down payment on a bigger place when the condo wasn't working for them anymore. $30,000. I wrote the check. I told myself it was family. After Kevin came into the picture, my relationship with my wife changed in ways I kept minimizing. She'd always been close with our daughter, and I understood that. But there was a new loyalty in the house that I couldn't account for. When I raised a question about Kevin's finances, my wife changed the subject. When I mentioned the car insurance I was covering, she said I was being controlling. Kevin had a way of framing every conversation about money as me being stingy, and somehow, over years, that framing had seeped into my own house. I don't say any of this to make myself sound blameless. I miss things. I chose comfort over clarity too many times. But there is one thing I will never blame myself for. One thing that showed me exactly who the people around me had become. That thing happened on a Tuesday in March 2 years ago. I had been having chest pains on and off for about a week. Nothing dramatic, a tightness, a heaviness, the kind of thing you wave off because you've been stressed and you're not sleeping well, and you tell yourself you'll call the doctor on Friday. I'd had a physical 6 months earlier, and my numbers were decent for my age. I wasn't worried. I was busy. Kevin and my daughter were throwing themselves a celebration party. I still cannot tell you what exactly was being celebrated. Kevin had done some kind of real estate deal that he'd been talking about for months, and the party had become a whole production. My wife had been helping them plan it for 3 weeks. It was all anyone talked about at Sunday dinners. The party was on a Saturday night. My wife left that afternoon to help set up. I told her I wasn't feeling great, that I might come later. She kissed me on the cheek and said, "Feel better," and walked out the door with a bottle of wine under each arm. By 7 o'clock, I was on the kitchen floor. I want to be precise about this because the precise details are the ones that still stop me sometimes in the middle of ordinary moments and make me set down whatever I'm holding. I was on the kitchen floor. I had my phone in my hand because I'd been trying to call my wife and she wasn't picking up. The pain was not like anything I'd expected. It wasn't shooting down my arm the way they show it in movies. It was a pressure, an enormous, unmovable pressure, like something was sitting on my chest and would not get up. I called her 4 times. On the 5th call, she picked up. I could hear the party in the background. Music, voices, someone laughing at something. I said, "I need you to come home." She said, "Honey, we're right in the middle of." I said, "I think I'm having a heart attack." There was a pause. Then she said, "Are you sure? You always get anxious when—" I had already called 911 on my other line. The dispatcher told me to stay on the floor. I don't know what else my wife said because I set the phone down and focused on breathing. The paramedics arrived in 8 minutes. I counted in some detached, professional corner of my brain that was apparently still keeping records even while the rest of me was trying not to die. My wife arrived at the hospital at 11:30. The party ended at 11. She came in still wearing her event clothes, a silk blouse, heeled boots. She smelled like the wine she'd been drinking for 4 hours. I had been in emergency surgery. I had a stent placed. The cardiologist told me afterward that another 30 minutes without intervention would have been a genuinely different conversation. She cried when she saw me. She held my hand. She said she was sorry. She didn't know it was that serious. She thought I was being anxious. I looked at her and I thought about 37 years. I said, "I called you and told you I thought I was having a heart attack." She said, "I know, I'm so sorry." That would have been the moment, if she had stayed, if she had been there hour after hour, the way I had been for her gallbladder surgery in 2019, the way I had been every time our daughter was sick in the hospital as a child, the way you show up for people you actually love. She stayed for 2 hours that first night and then went home because she said she needed to sleep in her own bed. My daughter came the next afternoon for 40 minutes and spent most of it on her phone. Kevin did not come at all. My wife told me he sent his best. I lay in that hospital bed for 6 days. I had a lot of time to think. Here is the thing about spending 31 years finding out the truth about people. When you finally turn that skill on your own life, you can't unfind what you find. I started thinking about the money. Not because I'm a man who thinks about money before people. I want to be clear about that. But because money is the most legible record of what people actually value. What you spend on, what you protect, what you sacrifice. That's the real ledger of a life. And I started running our ledger in my head. The $30,000 for the down payment, the car insurance, the dinners, a loan to Kevin 2 years prior for a business venture that had never been mentioned again or repaid, $16,000. My wife's credit card, which I paid, which I had never audited because I trusted her. I was lying in a hospital bed with a stent in my heart while the family I had built was going over brunch the next morning, and I realized I did not know what I had. My friend Carl came to see me on day 3. Carl is a retired attorney. We've played golf together for 20 years. He sat in the chair next to my bed and I told him everything, not in a dramatic way, just the way you tell an old friend who you know is going to tell you the truth back. Carl was quiet for a long time after I finished. Then he said, "What do you want to do?" I said, "I want to know exactly where I stand." He said, "Then let's find out." Carl referred me to a financial attorney and a forensic accountant, a woman who had done independent contract work for the federal government, very thorough, very discreet. While I was still recovering, I gave her remote access to everything I was legally permitted to share. What she found over the next 3 weeks was not a conspiracy. It was worse than a conspiracy. It was worse than a conspiracy in a way, because it was just carelessness. The carelessness of people who have never worried about money because someone else was always worrying about it for them. My wife's credit card had been financing Kevin and my daughter's lifestyle in ways I had not fully understood. Regular charges, restaurants, a gym membership for Kevin, a weekend trip to the Outer Banks that I had not been invited on, a piece of furniture for their house. Not enormous amounts, individually. Together over 3 years, just over $41,000. The $16,000 loan had in fact been used as Kevin's portion of a poker game buy-in at a casino in Maryland, which I know because Carl found a man who knew a man, and these things have a way of surfacing when you actually look. I was not angry when I learned this. I want to be honest about that. I was something quieter and more permanent than anger. I was done. The process of disentangling a life is, I can tell you, not the dramatic thing movies make it look like. It is paperwork. It is phone calls. It is sitting in a law office in khaki pants while someone explains a document to you in plain language and you sign your name over and over. Carl helped me find a divorce attorney. I am not going to detail the specifics of my estate or our settlement negotiations because that is still ongoing, and I have been advised to say nothing public. What I will tell you is that I had taken certain steps during my recovery, steps that were entirely legal and entirely within my rights, to restructure what was mine to restructure. The investment accounts in my name alone were moved. I had a life insurance policy, a good one, 30 years of premiums, with my wife as primary beneficiary. I called the carrier. I changed the beneficiary to my brother in Charlottesville. It took 11 minutes. My brother did not know I was doing this. I simply needed someone I trusted. I have since had that conversation with him. The property, we had the house and a small rental property in the Shenandoah Valley, was something I had to move carefully with legal guidance. I won't say more than that. What I will say is this. By the time I was fully recovered and back in my own house, we were still living together at that point, which was its own particular quiet agony. Everything that was movable had been moved. Everything that was mine had been documented, and I had a very clear picture of what the next chapter was going to look like. My wife did not know any of this. My daughter did not know. Kevin certainly did not know. The moment Kevin found out was not a moment I was present for. I heard about it afterward from Carl, who heard it from someone who knew someone. This is a small enough professional world. Apparently Kevin and my daughter had gone to make a purchase, a car, a new one. They'd been talking about a truck for his business, and the financing fell through. He called my wife to ask her to put it on the credit card. My wife called the credit card company. The card had been closed. I was in Charlottesville with my brother when this happened. I had left 3 weeks earlier, told my wife I needed time and space to think about our marriage and my health, which was true, and I had not come back. There is a particular kind of phone call I had been expecting. It came the afternoon. The card was closed. I let it go to voicemail. My wife's message was 5 minutes long. I will not describe it in detail. I will say that it did not begin with, "How are you?" or "Are you okay?" or any form of inquiry about the man who had 4 months earlier nearly died in his kitchen while she was at a party. It began with a question about money. That told me everything I needed to know about whether I had made the right decision. My daughter called an hour later. Her message was shorter and more direct, and I will not repeat it here. Kevin did not call because Kevin is, in the end, a coward, and cowards only come forward when there's something to gain. Here's what I want you to understand about the months that have followed. I am not a man who enjoys conflict. I am not a man who wanted any of this. I wanted for 37 years exactly what I thought I had: a family, a home, a partnership with someone I'd chosen and who had chosen me. The loss of that is real. I do not want anyone reading this to think I am celebrating, but I will tell you what I am. I am 64 years old, and for the first time in longer than I can honestly remember, I am living a day that is entirely my own. I am in a rental house in Charlottesville, 10 minutes from my brother and his wife. I have a cardiologist I see monthly. I walk 3 miles every morning on the Rivanna Trail, at whatever pace my heart decides is correct that day. I have been cooking, which I haven't done since my 20s. Simple things: pasta, grilled fish, a soup my mother used to make that I found the recipe for in a box in the back of my closet. Carl came down last month. We played 9 holes and then sat on the back porch of my rental and talked about things that had nothing to do with money or lawyers or any of it. There is a version of this story where I am the cautionary tale, the old man who worked his whole life and got taken. And maybe that version is true too. But I made it off that kitchen floor. That's not nothing. My daughter called me last week. Not about money. I think she has finally understood that conversation is over. She called, I think, because enough time has passed, and because whatever has happened in her own house has made her do some thinking of her own. We did not talk for long. We did not solve anything. But she called. I am not optimistic, exactly. I'm something more useful than optimistic. I know how to read the foundations. I know which cracks are cosmetic and which ones run all the way down. And I know that the building I'm in now, the small, quiet one I'm building for the last chapter of my life, is standing on solid ground. My hands have been in too many walls to settle for anything less. People ask me sometimes. Not many people know the full story, but the ones who do, they ask me if I regret waiting so long. 37 years. All that time, all those Sunday dinners, all those checks written. Do I wish I'd seen it sooner? Honestly, I'm not sure that's the right question. I spent my career watching people make decisions under pressure and then watching those decisions catch up with them. That's the thing about cause and effect. It doesn't announce itself. It just accumulates quietly in the background, the way water gets behind a wall. You don't see the damage until the paint starts to bubble. And by then, it's already deep. My wife made a choice on a Tuesday night in March. I called her and told her I thought I was having a heart attack, and she stayed at the party. That choice didn't come from nowhere. It came from years of smaller choices, choices to look away, to prioritize comfort, to let Kevin's version of reality slowly replace her own judgment. The choice she made that night was just the moment the wall finally showed what had been building behind it. And Kevin. I don't spend a lot of energy on Kevin anymore, but I'll say this. A man who borrows $16,000 from his father-in-law and uses it for a poker buy-in has already told you everything you need to know about his character. I just wasn't listening carefully enough. I was listening the way you listen to a radio station you're not quite tuned to. You hear the sound. You know something's off, but you keep hoping the signal will clear. It didn't clear. What I understand now, sitting on the back porch of a rental house in Charlottesville with a kind of quiet I hadn't known in decades, is that the consequences people face are almost never arbitrary. They are the logical conclusion of the choices they keep making. My wife chose the party over the hospital room. She had been making that choice in smaller ways for years. The account being empty was not a punishment I invented. It was the natural result of me finally paying attention to what I'd been ignoring. And my own consequences are mine to own, too. I chose comfort over clarity for a very long time. I wrote checks I shouldn't have written. I gave Kevin the benefit of the doubt long after the evidence said otherwise, because it was easier than the conversation it would have required. That was a failure of honesty, not with them, but with myself. Intelligence isn't just about what you can figure out. It's about whether you're willing to look at what you find. The hard part of getting older isn't the body, though the body makes its opinions known. The hard part is accepting that wisdom doesn't come free. You pay for it with the years it took to learn it. I paid 37 years to learn that you cannot build a life on a foundation you've never actually inspected. I know that now in my bones, the same way I know the difference between a load-bearing wall and one that's just there to make the room look finished. Carl drove down last month. We played 9 holes and didn't talk about any of it. That too is something I've learned. Knowing when the work is done and it's time to simply be somewhere good. I made it off that kitchen floor. I built something after. Smaller, quieter, honest all the way through. That's what I'll stand on.